Hello, and welcome to our launch webinar on our new improvements concerning our newsletter subscriber feature. We have made easy-to-use newsletter lists and added better subscribe options. And today's webinar is going to cover what is new, what will you have to do, how do you administrate it, and what benefits can you get from using our newsletter lists. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ruth. I work at ChurchDesk in support. So if you call or write, you usually end up with me. You have the ability to post questions in the chat. If you do so, I'm going to see it on my other screen. So if I look up, that is because there is a question in the chat. If it fits thematically, I'm going to answer right away. If it is a more broader question or we're going to talk about it later on, I'm going to save it for that appropriate point in time. So without further ado, let's start. This is our agenda for today. We are going to talk about what exactly are we launching and the reasons for doing so. Then I'm going to do a demonstration and give you a guide for using the new features. And in the end, we have already collected some questions and answers, and you can ask additional questions if you have any. So, what are we launching and why? We have created something that you see here, which is a better sign-up option for multiple different newsletters you might have. And you can add it to any website, be it a ChurchDesk website or a non-ChurchDesk website. You can add this so-called widget, and people will be able to sign up for your newsletters and choose which ones directly. There is also going to be the possibility to sign up to newsletters directly from forms. It used to be that all different consents that you had created were just on a form. Now the newsletter sign up option is going to be on the forms directly, and you can add other consents as you might like. Newsletters and consents in general now work better together. There is now a default consent for newsletters and the double opt-in option. So this is what people are going to get sent if they like to subscribe to the family newsletter in this case, and they're going to be able to read exactly about the consent and agree to it. We have also created a consent template. We're going to talk about this later in detail, but what has changed about the consent is that now it used to be that you had to link to a consent, and now you have the choice. You can provide your consent statement as a text. This is our template. I'm going to show it to you in detail later. Or you can choose to, as you used to do before, provide your consent statement as a link. The consent template that we have created is already ready to use and is for now automatically the default for newsletters. You can change it and modify it to fit your needs as you like. It is, for the contacts themselves, now way easier to subscribe and unsubscribe to newsletters because it is an actual list now and not just a list you created yourself through filters. So it needed to match certain criteria, and something would sometimes go wrong and it would be complicated to have the view. Now it is simply, did this person subscribe? Yes, no, on the list. And the subscriber themselves can see, okay, I am subscribed to these newsletters, and can choose, do I want to stay subscribed? Do I want to unsubscribe? Here they can make a choice about their consent. And you also will have the option in the settings of the individual contact to manage what they are subscribed to and to register their consent manually. For example, if it's an older person that comes up to you and says, I do agree to that, can you register that for me? It is now super easy to do, and also to resubscribe someone who accidentally unsubscribed. So this is the start of our demo and the guide. And this is what we are going to cover. I am going to show you how to convert your current filters into newsletter lists, how to add the sign up widget that you saw before to your website. We're going to talk a bit about the difference between filters and newsletter lists, as there are certain differences, how to add and remove contacts from a newsletter list, how to create a different newsletter list, how to add the newsletter sign-ups onto forms, how to change the consents for your newsletter lists, and I'm going to show you what the newsletter sign-up is going to look on your website and how to remove the old way of signing up for the newsletter, which was the subscribe view. I'm now going to switch to my installation, and what you will see if you either go to the people module or the homepage module is I'm going to go to people. This. You're going to see that information, the setup wizard, that we just launched a better way of managing your newsletter lists and subscribers. It has a preview of the widget, which is what's going to pop up on your website if you choose to use it. And this is some information about what is new and what we are going to do now. In case that you have questions, you can always call support or check out our guide or check support.churchdesk.com to find certain articles that we have written to help you with the new feature. In case you just do not have newsletters, you can click this button and the wizard will close and not pop up again. If you're like, in general, I would like to use it, but I just don't have the time right now, you can click skip setup wizard, and the next time you go either to people or the homepage, it's going to pop up again. What we are going to do now is we are going to click on continue, because we actually do have the approximately 5 minutes it's going to take to set this up. And this is what is going to open now. You can, as I've already mentioned, convert your current list that you created using a filter. Just a little throwback. You create a list with a filter by saying, I'm going to make a list, and every contact that fits the criteria, so this filter, is going to be filtered onto this list. And that had a lot of room for error, especially for people who did not use lists all that much. So now it is going to be way simpler. But if you already have one of those old filter lists for your newsletter and you're sending out newsletters, you will, of course, want to take those contacts with you into your new newsletter list. So we are going to create a new newsletter list and going to take our contacts with us onto that list. So the first thing you will have to do is to give this a title, and we are simply going to call it newsletter for now. You can also give it another name. This is just for demonstrational purposes. Will you start by adding contacts as subscribers to this newsletter list? If you say no, it's going to create the list and it's not going to add any subscribers that you already have on one of your old filters maybe. But we are going to say yes. We want to add contacts as subscribers from a current filter. So what you will then have to do is you click into this and you're going to select the appropriate filter. Since this is our newsletter list, I want all the contacts that are on my filter newsletter, and I want to take them with me to my new newsletter list. This part, which consent should your newsletter subscribers consent to? This is right now the default consent that we have created. You will be able to change it. If you click here, you see other consents that you have and that you could choose. I'm going to leave it with the one that we made. And this finally is, do you want this sign up widget to pop up on your website so people can easily choose the newsletter they're interested in, enter name and email, and subscribe. If you have a ChurchDesk website and want the widget, just turn this blue with a little tick. If you don't want it, you can turn it off. It's going to turn gray and there's going to be this little X. We want it on our website. If you do not have a ChurchDesk website, you can get the embed JavaScript code that you can add to any other website. You simply click here, and there you see the code. You copy it and you add it to your website, and this little widget is going to pop up and work with the people module in ChurchDesk when people use it to sign up for your newsletter list. And this is all it takes to get started with your very first newsletter list, including the migration of the contacts from your old filter and this default consent for your first newsletter list. I'm going to click Save. And this is going to pop up. What does this mean? It means since we chose a different consent than we used before, all 22 contacts that were on my old newsletter filter list will be registered as they do now consent to the new consent to being contacted by the church. I click on Approve, and my settings were saved and my list was created. Where can I see this newsletter list now? As you might already have noticed, we did a few sneaky changes already to the lists, and there is two different symbols now. If you're in contacts and you see your shared lists, there is going to be your old filter lists, which to indicate that they were created using a filter, have this little filter symbol. And down here, we now have the newsletter list. Has a little Wi-Fi symbol indicating that this is a list that is created directly from the website into people. So it's very much without the use of those filters. A detailed overview of your filter lists and your newsletter lists is in Lists, where you now have two tabs. So the first one is what you are used to. These are your old filters. And if you create a newsletter list from a filter, so if you migrate your contacts from one filter list to a newsletter list, it is still going to keep the old list. As you can see here, there is still the newsletter list as it used to be created with the filters. And over here, I now have my newsletter list. And I can see that the 22 contacts that I took with me from my former list are now on the newsletter list. If you want to create another newsletter list, for example, maybe you have a newsletter for all people under 20, you click on Create and you choose, do you want to create a filter list or another newsletter list? The filter list, it works just the same as you're used to it. You will need to choose a criteria that people will have to fit. And the newsletter list is going to work like this. You need to give it a title. So let's just say this is going to be the young newsletter. And you could either, again, migrate another filter list, or you could just say, I just want to create it for now and edit it later. And then you could just create it. And it's going to show up here. It does not have contacts yet. So what are we going to do to get contacts onto this newsletter list? In the widget, it's going to be listed so people can choose to subscribe to it or not. That is one way of getting subscriber. Or people can tell you that they want to be on the list. And this is going to look somewhat like this. You choose a person, contact, and you go into the settings. And there you see that this contact is already subscribed in newsletters and subscriptions to the standard newsletter. So it was one of the contacts that we took with us. and not subscribed to the Young newsletter. And I made a click, and that person is now also subscribed to the Young newsletter. So if someone accidentally unsubscribes and is like, oh no, I unsubscribed, what do I do? No problem, you go here, you just reset that tick. Or if someone says, well, I am moving away, for example, I don't need your newsletters anymore because I am moving to another city, you can just remove that and it's going to be saved. Down here, you see the consent as it used to be. This is a new field. The default consent for all newsletters means that this, because we took this person with us from our old filter list onto the new newsletter list, and that is why they are now registered as having consented to the new default consent. And if there are other consents, you can register it manually. All right. So, speaking of consents, they're still in the consent tab. And what is new for once is that the default consent for all newsletters is going to be marked as such. This is the one that we have created. If you create a new consent statement, it is going to look a little bit different. So, this is the consent summary. You need to say what exactly people are consenting to. And this is what it's going to look like to the people. If you want to make this consent the default for all newsletter signups, you will have to tick that option. And this is going to make this consent that you create here the default consent and remove the other one as default consent. So you now have two options. You can either provide the full consent statement as a text. That is new. You weren't able to do that before. You could only put in a link. We have now added this text box where you can either use the template that we provide, or you can use your own text, or you can also choose the option as it used to be where you provide a link to the consent statement. So I am just going to save this so you can actually see what it is going to look like. I'm going to save it, and because I created a new default consent and it's going to replace the old one, is this window. So what it means is that with me creating a new consent, no one has yet accepted the thing. And the current contacts that had accepted my old default consent will automatically be registered as having accepted the new consent. So if you follow the setup wizard and use for now our template and later decide, oh, I want to change it to my own church's consent statement and update it, all the contacts that have accepted the default consent before will be migrated to accept this new consent. I click on continue, and as you can see, this one that I just named test, so you can see what it looks like, is created. All right. If you want to contact a newsletter list, it works just the same as it used to. I'm just going to demonstrate it. The way to tell them apart is it's in here. And this will then send to your new list. One thing to mention about the lists, if you take a filter list into a newsletter list, it is going to keep the old list, but for better overview, you can then just delete the old filter list and separate your actual filter lists that might have criteria as people over the age of 65, or a list of vegetarians for certain events that you're hosting where there's going to be food and where those people might want to submit information, and your actual newsletter lists where you send out newsletters using our template, for example. So I am now going to go to the home page, which would also give you the setup wizard again, which I am going to skip for now. And this is still looking the same as before. And now the newsletter widget, after a few seconds, is moving in from the side, and you can choose to sign up for them. I'm going to do that so you see how easy it is. I want to get the newsletter. I don't want this one. I am going to enter my name and my email. And now it tells me that it's almost finished, and I'm going to get an email where I have to confirm my subscription. Until then, it is pending, because to make sure that I am not a robot, I will need to say, yes, I actually do confirm the consent statement, and I can close the widget, and I am subscribed to the newsletter list. One thing to keep in mind is, now that you have the widget and people can use that to sign up for the newsletter list, if you have a subscribe view that people used before to sign up for your newsletter list that was created through a filter, that could now be confusing to use two lists at the same time, you will want to remove your old subscribe view. And you can find them if you go to the homepage and click on Toolbox, go into the Content Manager, so Manage Content, and look for subscribe views. You want to update the content, and then you see that there is a sign up for your newsletter and get next week's highlights. Those are both subscribe views that created lists that a newsletter was then sent to. And what you will want to do is you will want to delete those so that you can exclusively use the new newsletter list, which is easy to manage. So you click on Edit, scroll all the way down, and you choose to delete. Are you sure you want to delete sign for your newsletter? Yes, I'm deleting it. And the subscribe view is removed. So this way, when people sign up, they're going to do it through the widget, as I have demonstrated before. And it is directly going to land on your newsletter list, where it is way easier to have an overview and to manage the subscription and the consents. I'm going to go back into people for now. And into the lists, into the second tab. And because I subscribed, there is now 23 contacts on the newsletter list. And if I click on it, 23 contacts are on that list. And there's me. And my email status is pending because I did not yet go into my emails and confirm the consent. So in the settings, you can see that I'm subscribed to the newsletter, and the consent is not confirmed yet, so we are waiting that. I am now going to check my outline. So we have covered how to convert, yes, your current filters into the newsletter lists, how to add the sign up widget to your website through the wizard, what the difference between filters and newsletter lists is, how to add and remove contacts from the newsletter list in the people module, how to create newsletter lists in general, how to add newsletter sign up on forms. That is what I forgot about. how to change the consents for newsletter lists, and the demonstration in general. And the forms is actually now the last part I'm going to cover. We are going into forms and going to create a form. Let's just say it's the contact us form. There you see the preview. And we're going to use the template. And as you can see, what is under the information right here is now these new newsletter sign-up possibilities. So it used to be that each and every single consent that you had would just like be added here and you had to remove them manually, and that was cumbersome because you don't always need every consent. So what is new now is that your consents, they're still here. If you click on the little arrows in the contact area, you still see the consents that you have created, and there is the newsletter sign-up possibilities. So these are going to be under every contact form, and people will then be able to choose to subscribe to the newsletter. It's going to work exactly as the widget, since people will have to enter their name and email already. And if they want to subscribe to the newsletter, they are, with the submission, going to get the email being asked to confirm their subscription to the newsletter. And it is going to be super simple, super easy, and they will be directly on your list. I'm just going to save this. There we go. So this is, for now, the end of the practical demonstration. I'm going to go back into this presentation. So now we also covered how to add the newsletter signups on forms and why it is practical. And the last part, questions and answers, that we thought you might have. If you have any more questions, please add them into the chat and I'm going to reply. So can I still use my filters? Yes, absolutely. You can create new filter lists. You can use your old filter list. Even if you convert a filter list to a newsletter, so you migrate the contacts and they will be registered as subscribing to the new newsletter default consent, the old filter will still exist. If you plan on using the new newsletter list for the newsletter exclusively, I would recommend that you delete the old filter after you migrated the contacts, just to avoid confusion, as they probably have the same name and it might be confusing to have two different lists that work in different ways. How do I add the newsletter widget to any website? Either you were in the setup wizard and you did copy the code, or I'm going to show you how to do that. You go into the ChurchDesk settings. So you click on your name, go into the settings, and then you are in the part people. And there is the newsletter pop-up. So this for ChurchDesk websites, like, do you want to edit? And here is where you get the aforementioned and shown JavaScript code. You copy it, put on your website, and you're set. Another question, will my current newsletter subscribe views continue to work normally? In general, yes. If you say that right now you have too much on your plate, or the person that usually handles the website is sick and you want to wait implementing the new newsletter lists, yes, you can absolutely continue to use the old subscribe views. And they will continue to work normally and put people onto the filter list that you have for your newsletter, so you're not in a big rush to change. But in general, approximately by September, we will remove Google reCAPTCHA, because everything Google is causing GDPR issues, and we strive to be GDPR compliant. So Right now, if you use a subscribe view, Google reCAPTCHA protects you from signups through bots. We have implemented for the newsletter lists and the widget different kind of technology that does the same thing but is more GDPR compliant than Google is. And the double opt-in is another measure to make sure that it is not a bot signing up to your newsletter, because the person will actually get an email and will have to say, yes, I actually want to subscribe to this newsletter and I do agree to this consent. Are there any other questions that you might have? I'm just going to wait a little bit and see if there is anything that might be coming up. It does not seem like there are any questions at the moment, so you will get a recording of this entire webinar. Oh, there is a question, actually. All okay, thank you. That is good to hear, good to know. Thank you, Chris, for the feedback. So you will get a recording of this webinar, and we are also going to add screenshots and videos to our support center at support.churchdesk.com. So you will be able to read up on certain things and make sure that you're up to date. Thank you for attending this webinar in the morning. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that you will enjoy and get good use out of our new newsletter tool. Goodbye.